The afternoon sun beat down on the glossy black surface of the 1969 Mustang. Its hood up, engine silent, and owner visibly frustrated. Lucas Grant stood beside the classic car, swiping at his forehead with a silk handkerchief. His button-down shirt, rolled at the sleeves, had already started to cling to his skin. He tapped his phone, looking up from the screen toward the tiny garage across the street. He had passed it a dozen times but never thought he'd need I-10 till now. The sound of boots crunching gravel caught his attention. From behind the open garage door, a young woman emerged, wiping her hands on a greasy towel. She wore dark coveralls, streaked with oil and time, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She couldn't have been older than 26 without asking permission. She walked straight toward the Mustang, eyes narrowing as she took in the engine. "You're flooding it," she said, leaning over the side. "Old Mustangs don't like being bullied." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me," she shot him a half smile. "Pumped the gas more than twice on a carbureted engine, and you're just drowning it. Can I?" Lucas stepped back cautiously. He wasn't used to strangers taking command, especially ones who looked like they worked 14-hour shifts in a garage. But something about her confidence made him curious. "Be my guest." She leaned in, tools already in hand. Within moments, she removed the air filter, adjusted the choke, and tinkered with something Lucas didn't understand. She explained everything as she moved, but he barely followed. What caught his attention more was the way she moved, like she belonged under the hood, like she'd done this her whole life. "I'm Maya," she said, eyes still on the engine. "Lucas," he replied. "You work here." "I work everywhere, here mostly. Sometimes I fix cars at night in my own driveway. Gotta hustle, you know." Lucas nodded, though he didn't. He owned 3 downtown condos, 2 vacation homes, and had never had to hustle a day in his life. But he liked the way she said it. It made her sound strong, real. With a twist and a tap, Maya stepped back. "Try it now." Lucas climbed in and turned the key. The Mustang growled to life on the first try, purring with smooth, satisfying rhythm. He let out a laugh. "You're a magician." "I'm a mechanic," she corrected, grinning. "There's a difference." He got out, looking genuinely impressed. "You know, most guys I know would have told me to call a tow truck. Most guys you know probably don't fix things with their hands." She shot back, crossing her arms. He chuckled. "Fair point." There was a brief pause, and Lucas noticed the smudge of oil on her cheek. She didn't wipe it off, didn't seem to care, and somehow, that made her even more captivating. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" Maya raised a brow. "You serious? That was a 5-minute fix. I'd feel better if I paid you, then feel better about saying thank you and move on," she said, turning toward the garage. Lucas watched her walk away, surprised at how disappointed he felt. It wasn't just her skills, it was the way she didn't treat him like someone important. The way she looked right past the expensive watch and the car to focus on what mattered. "Hey Maya," he called. She turned halfway. He hesitated. "Thanks." "Really?" She gave him a thumbs up and disappeared back into the garage. The Mustang purred beneath him, but Lucas didn't drive off right away. Instead, he sat in the front seat, staring after her. Something told him this wasn't the last time he'd be stopping by. 3 days passed before Lucas found himself turning onto the same quiet road again. The Mustang had been running perfectly since Maya's quick fix, so perfectly, in fact, that he'd invented a strange new rattling sound just to justify his return. He hated how obvious it felt, but not enough to stop himself. There was something about her, the way she didn't look at him like a man with deep pockets, the way she knew cars better than some of his mechanics in Los Angeles. He'd met plenty of women, many of them dazzling, poised, even charming, but none had ever left him wondering what she was doing now. Under a lifted hood somewhere, he parked outside the garage, trying to look casual as he stepped out. Maya was crouched beside a rusty pickup, socket wrench in hand, sleeves rolled past her elbows. Her hair was tied back again, but loose strands fell around her cheek as she worked. Lucas cleared his throat. She looked up, squinting in the sun. "Back already?" "I think the engine's still acting up," he said. Maya tilted her head. "You're sure? I thought you said it ran like a dream." He gave a sheepish shrug. "Now it hums more than it growls." She chuckled. "That's not a problem. That's a compliment." She stood up, wiped her hands on a nearby rag, and motioned toward the car. "Pop the hood." Lucas followed, and as she leaned over the engine again, She glanced at him. "You're not here for the car, are you?" He froze. "What makes you say that?" She smiled to herself. "People usually don't visit a garage unless something's broken." "Maybe I'm broken," he joked, then immediately regretted it. She didn't laugh. Instead, she looked at him with the kind of honest gaze that made him feel transparent. "Coffee?" she asked suddenly. He blinked. "You're asking me? I figured it's either that or you come back tomorrow pretending your tires squeak." Lucas laughed, grateful for the shift in tone. "Coffee it is." They crossed the street to a tiny cafe nestled between a thrift store and a barber shop. It smelled of cinnamon and old wooden floors. They sat by the window, sunlight washing over their table as Maya sipped a black coffee and Lucas stirred cream into his with deliberate slowness. "So," she began, "what do rich guys like you do when you're not faking car trouble?" Lucas smiled. "Property. I buy ugly buildings and make them pretty." She nodded. "Like flipping cars, but with bricks." "Pretty much. It pays well. Gives me freedom." "You look like someone who's always had freedom." "Looks can lie." Maya tilted her head thoughtfully, but didn't press. She shared stories about growing up with her dad, how he taught her to change oil before she could legally drive, how he used to name their cars like they were people. Her voice softened when she talked about losing him, but she didn't dwell on the pain, just moved through it like someone who'd carried it long enough to make peace with it. Lucas found himself leaning in more than he realized. Then, as she reached for her cup again, something caught his eye, the subtle glint of a ring on her left hand. His heart skipped. He'd seen it before but had dismissed it. Now, in this quiet moment, it felt unavoidable. "You're married?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Maya paused. The question changed the air between them. She slowly pulled her hand back. "No," she said quietly. "Not exactly." Lucas opened his mouth to ask more, but she looked away, and he didn't push it. Instead, they sat in silence, the clink of spoons and distant chatter filling the space between them. When they returned to the garage, Maya walked ahead of him and didn't say much. She thanked him for the coffee, then disappeared behind the roll-up door. Lucas stood outside for a moment longer than necessary. Something about her intrigued him even more now. But that ring, it had a story, and Lucas couldn't help but want to know what it was. Lucas hadn't intended to come back the very next day. In fact, he'd told himself to wait at least a week, give it space, play it cool. But that plan didn't last. He found himself behind the wheel of his Mustang again, cruising through the quiet streets toward the small-town garage like it was some kind of magnet pulling him back. Maya was outside this time, under the hood of an old Jeep, grease on her forearms and a pencil stuck behind her ear. She looked up the second he pulled in and smirked. "I thought I fixed all your imaginary car problems," she said, leaning on the edge of the Jeep. Lucas raised his hands in surrender. "Guilty. No car issues today. Just figured I'd see what you were working on." She squinted at him, then shrugged. "Water pump. Guy said it overheated. I think he's been putting soda in the radiator." Lucas winced. "Soda? Some people think sugar cools things down. All it does is gunk up the engine." He nodded and walked closer. For a moment, they stood side by side, watching steam rise lazily from the Jeep's open hood. The hum of tools and the occasional shout from the shop echoed behind them. Maya broke the silence. "You always this curious about mechanics?" "Only the interesting ones," he said, glancing at her. She didn't look back. He hesitated. The question had been burning in his mind since yesterday's coffee. He tried to hold it in, tried to focus on the Jeep, but it slipped out anyway. "So, the ring." Maya's body tensed, just barely. She didn't look at him. "What about it?" Lucas suddenly felt like he'd overstepped. When I asked if you were married, you said not exactly. I didn't want to assume anything." She finally turned to face him. Her voice was calm, but her eyes had dimmed slightly. "It's a long story. I've got time," he said softly. Maya folded her arms and leaned back against the Jeep. "I was engaged 3 years ago. His name withdrew. He worked here too. We were going to open our own shop. Then one night, he took a client's bike out for a test run and never came back. Drunk driver blew a red light." Lucas felt the breath leave his chest. "I'm sorry," she nodded, eyes on the gravel beneath her boots. "Everyone says that. I wore the ring for a while because it made me feel closer to him. Then I kept it on because I didn't know how to take it off without feeling guilty." He stayed quiet. "It's not about love anymore," she said. her voice almost a whisper. It's about remembering, and not letting go too fast. Lucas nodded slowly. I get that. She looked up. Do you? He held her gaze. Maybe not exactly, but I know what it's like to lose something that made you feel like yourself. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The hum of the shop continued in the background, muffled by the weight of shared silence. Then Maya straightened. Anyway, thanks for asking. Most people just assume, or they stare and don't ask at all. I didn't want to assume anything about you, Lucas said. You're not exactly predictable. She chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. Lucas smiled. You should. They worked side by side on the Jeep for the next half hour, falling into a rhythm of light conversation and soft laughter. It wasn't flirtation, it was something quieter, deeper. When he finally left, Maya watched his car drive off from the garage entrance. She still wore the ring, but for the first time in a long while, she touched it without feeling afraid. The days rolled by slowly, and Lucas kept coming back. He didn't bother with made-up car problems anymore. Sometimes he'd bring lunch for the crew. Sometimes just coffee for Maya. Other times, he came with no excuse and all just stood in the garage's shade, watching her work, handing her tools, learning the difference between a torque wrench and a ratchet like it actually mattered to his life. What surprised him most was that Maya didn't push him away. She seemed different, now, a little softer, still guarded, still wrapped in layers of quiet strength. But she laughed more easily. She even let him help her restore an old carburetor. One afternoon, though, she made fun of how slowly he turned the bolts. Careful, city boy, she teased, wiping her hands. You'll break a nail. I'm willing to risk it for a chance to impress the boss. He replied with a grin. She rolled her eyes, but her smile lingered longer this time. That night, they sat outside the garage on 2 upside-down crates, sipping cold drinks under a soft evening sky. The streets were quiet, the kind of peaceful stillness that only small towns really knew. Lucas glanced at her. You ever think about leaving this place? She looked ahead, thoughtful. All the time, so why haven't you? She tapped her fingers on her cup. Because leaving would mean giving up what I started here. My dad built this garage from nothing. It's more than just a job. It's home. Lucas nodded. He understood that feeling more than he expected. His world was full of luxury, but it lacked roots. Everything he owned could be sold, traded, or upgraded. Nothing was permanent. Nothing was home. Maya shifted, the sunset catching the side of her face. What about you? You ever want to just walk away from it all? He took a breath. More than I let on. Real estate makes money, sure, but at the end of the day, it's just numbers. There's no noise of an engine kicking in, no hands getting dirty, just paperwork and overpriced coffee. Sounds exhausting. It is, he admitted. But then I come here, and somehow, watching you rebuild a water pump feels more satisfying than closing $1 million deal. She laughed. You really know how to flatter a girl with grime under her nails. He smiled. It's not flattery, it's truth. There was a pause, not awkward, just heavy, charged with something neither of them was quite ready to say out loud. Maya looked down at her hands. I'm not great at this part, you know. What part? Letting people in again, trusting they won't leave like everything else. Lucas leaned forward. I'm not here to leave. Maya looked up, her eyes guarded but open. Then why are you here? He hesitated, then said honestly, because every time I walk away, I want to come back, and not just for the car. Maya didn't answer. Instead, she stood and wiped her hands on a nearby rag. You should probably get going. The mosquitoes will be out soon. Lucas stood too but didn't move toward the car. You know, I meant what I said. I know, she replied softly, almost too quietly to hear. Then she turned and walked back into the garage. Lucas stood in the quiet for a few moments, then finally climbed into the Mustang and drove away slowly, the engine low and smooth. Back, inside, Maya paused at her workbench, her hand resting on a socket wrench. She looked down at her ring dot, and for the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to take it off. Lucas hadn't seen Maya in 4 days. No texts, no coffee runs, no sarcastic remarks tossed across a car hood. It felt like someone had cut off the only real thing he'd found in months. He kept telling himself to give her space, but space was beginning to feel like silence, and silence was never something he handled well. He drove past the garage twice that week without stopping. The third time, he found himself pulling into the gravel lot again. The bay doors were up, but Maya wasn't there. An older man stood near the back, organizing tools on a shelf. Lucas recognized him, Mr. Jensen, the shop owner who'd taken Maya in after her father passed away. Lucas hesitated before approaching. "Hey, do you have a minute?" The old man gave him a curious glance. "You're the guy with the Mustang, right?" "Yeah, Lucas." Jensen nodded. "She's not here today, I figured." Lucas paused. "Can I ask you something about her?" Jensen looked at him carefully. "Depends what you're asking." Lucas tried to sound casual, but it came out too serious. "That ring she wears, I know she was engaged, but why does she still wear it?" Jensen let out a breath and set the wrench down. "You don't know the whole story. I don't want to assume anything. I just want to understand." The old man leaned against the workbench and crossed his arms. Drew wasn't just her fiancé, he was her whole world. They'd known each other since middle school, started fixing cars together before they could drive. When her father got sick, Drew helped her keep the garage going. They planned to get married right here, in the shop, with oil stains on the floor and all. Lucas swallowed hard. What happened? Night before the wedding, a customer dropped off a bike. Drew said he'd take it for a spin, make sure everything was good. She told him to wait till morning. Jensen's voice cracked. He didn't. The silence stretched between them. They never caught the guy who hit him. Jensen added softly. She found the ring in his toolbox. Wears it to remind herself not to let her guard down again. Lucas felt a slow ache settle in his chest. She doesn't talk about it much, Jensen said, but she's still healing. Took her a year just to come back to the shop, another to start smiling again. Lucas looked down. She deserves more than what I've been offering. The old man chuckled lightly. She doesn't need saving, son. Just someone who won't run when it gets hard. Lucas nodded, then turned and walked back to the Mustang. As he sat behind the wheel, he didn't start the engine right away. That night, he stared at his phone for an hour before finally texting her. "Lucas, you ever let anyone else drive your Mustang?" A minute passed, then another. He was about to put the phone down when it buzzed. "Maya, only the ones I trust." He didn't need more than that. The next evening, the Mustang rolled slowly into the garage lot, just as the sun dipped behind the trees. Maya stood outside, arms crossed, waiting. Lucas stepped out and handed her the keys. She took them without a word, walked to the driver's side, and slid behind the wheel like she belonged there. "Ready?" she asked. "Always," he said. As the engine started, Maya looked over, her hand still resting on the key. Lucas noticed the ring was still there, but this time, her fingers didn't curl to hide it. They just rested gently on the wheel, steady and moving forward. The Mustang cut through the late afternoon like a knife through soft butter. Engine humming, tires gripping the winding road just outside town. Maya was behind the wheel, her hair catching the golden light through the open window, a rare smile tugging at her lips. Lucas sat in the passenger seat, watching the world blur past them but mostly watching her. Neither of them spoke for the first 15 minutes. The silence didn't feel awkward. It felt earned, like they were both letting the moment breathe. A classic playlist poured through the speakers. Aretha Franklin, Fleetwood Mac, Otis Redding, the kind of music that made you forget about time. "I missed this," Maya said eventually, eyes still on the road. "Driving? No. Trusting myself enough to drive without looking back every few seconds." Lucas glanced over, but she didn't meet his eyes. "I used to love road trips," she continued. "Drew and I would take off in his old truck whenever life got too loud. We'd go find a junkyard, dig through broken parts, and dream about building something new." Lucas leaned back in the seat. "That sounds like something out of a movie." It was, until it wasn't. A few more miles passed in thoughtful silence. Lucas finally asked, "You ever think about doing it again? Building something new?" She sighed. "It's not the same without him, and starting over feels like pretending the past didn't happen." Lucas turned toward her. "You're not pretending, you're surviving." Maya's grip tightened slightly. On the steering wheel, he continued, "I've spent most of my life running from things. Failure, expectations, even myself sometimes. You stayed. You rebuilt. That takes guts." For a second, Maya didn't say anything. Then, quietly, she said, "I'm tired of being strong all the time." Lucas reached over without thinking and gently placed his hand over hers on the gear. She didn't pull away. They drove another hour, ending up at a hilltop overlook where the sun was just beginning to kiss the horizon. Maya turned off the ignition, and the world became still, wrapped in amber light and warm wind. They stepped out of the car and stood beside each other, taking in the view. Lucas spoke softly. "Do you ever visit him?" Maya nodded. "Every month. There's a bench near the tree line at the cemetery. I sit there and tell him what I've fixed, or what I've messed up." Lucas watched her face, the way the sunset reflected in her eyes. "Do you think he'd want you to keep holding on this tightly?" She shook her head slowly. "No. He'd want me to be happy. But that's easier said than done." Lucas hesitated, then said, "I think he'd be proud of you, and I think he'd want you to let someone else in, if they were willing to earn it." She turned to him, and for the first time, really looked at him not as the rich stranger from the city, but as someone who might actually understand. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to be," Lucas said. "I'm just saying I'm here." The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees below. Maya reached up, touching the ring gently with her thumb, then let her hand fall back to her side. "I'm scared, Lucas." He nodded. "So am I." She laughed softly. "Well, at least we're scared together." They didn't kiss. They didn't make any promises. But when they got back into the Mustang, something between them had shifted. Not fast, not dramatic, just real. Maya drove back slowly, her foot steady on the pedal, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was driving away from something. She felt like she was driving toward it. 2 weeks passed after their hilltop drive. Things between Lucas and Maya grew more natural, more consistent, even easy. He stopped by the garage most afternoons, sometimes just to hand her a cold drink, sometimes to help clean carburetors or swap out spark plugs. They talked, joked, teased each other, and even began sharing bits of their routines like they belonged in each other's lives. But then Lucas did something that shook all of it. He arrived one Saturday with a white envelope in hand. No usual smile, no Mustang. Just him standing outside the garage with the sun at his back and hesitation in his eyes. Maya was on her knees, replacing brake pads on a Subaru. She looked up, immediately sensing something different in the air. "You come to give me bad news or good news?" she asked, brushing her hands on a rag. "I'm not sure yet," he replied, holding out the envelope. She stood slowly, wiping sweat from her forehead, and took it. Inside was a printed contract, simple, clean, straight to the point. It was a fully funded proposal to help Maya open her own garage, a real one, with modern lifts, tools, signage, everything. Lucas had already found a location 3 blocks down from the current shop, and the paperwork was ready. No interest, no loan, just a gift. She blinked at the pages. "Is this real?" "It is," he said gently. "You've been talking about doing it for years. You've got the talent, the vision. You just needed the chance." She stepped back like she'd been hit in the chest. "Lucas, I can't take this." "Why not?" "Because it feels like a handout." "It's not. It's an investment in someone I believe in." "That's exactly the problem," she said, her voice rising. "You believe in me more than I do, and I don't want to feel like I owe you." Lucas took a step closer. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do," she said, "because the moment I take this, everything changes. You're not just a friend anymore. You're someone I'm tied to. And if it all falls apart, I'm the girl who couldn't do it on her own." Lucas looked stunned. "Maya, this isn't about power. It's about trust." She swallowed hard, emotions rushing in too fast to stop. "I've had people walk into my life, fix something, then disappear when it got messy. I can't let that happen again. I'm not walking away, but I might." Lucas paused. Her words struck deeper than she knew. For all the walls he thought he'd broken through, this one still stood tall. He thought about pushing back, about saying more, but her eyes were already guarded again. So he nodded and walked away. The next few days were silent. No Mustang, no Lucas, no texts. The garage felt heavier somehow, colder. Maya went through her motions, fixed engines, smiled for customers, but something inside her ached. Then Thursday came. Her truck broke down 2 blocks from home. Steam rose from the hood, and she stood on the side of the road, too tired to curse. And there he was. Lucas. No Mustang this time, just him, jogging up the sidewalk with a wrench in hand and concern in his eyes. She crossed her arms as he approached. "You still stalking me?" "Only when I sense engine trouble." She laughed despite herself. Figures. He didn't reach for the hood. Instead, he looked her in the eyes. "You were right. I did try to fix things. But maybe I should have just stood beside you instead." She stared at him for a long second. I've always known how to fix engines. What I'm still learning is how to let people help without feeling weak." Lucas smiled. "Then let's learn together." The silence between them wasn't cold this time. It was warm, familiar. She stepped aside and handed him the wrench. "Be warned," she said. "I'm not easy to work with." Lucas grinned. "Neither am I." The morning sun rose over the quiet town, casting long golden rays across cracked sidewalks and half-empty streets. Outside the garage, Maya stood beside her truck, the hood open and tools scattered across the front seat. Lucas crouched next to her, sleeves rolled up, hands dirty with grease. They worked in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence shared by two people who'd said all the important things, and now just needed to prove them. Maya tightened the last bolt, wiped her hands on a rag, and let out a soft breath. "She run now." Lucas nodded. "You sure?" "I'm always sure," she said, smirking. Lucas stood, brushing off his jeans. "You know, I could get used to this. Fixing broken trucks on the side of the road," she teased. "No," he said, looking at her. "Waking up and knowing I'll see you." She didn't respond right away. She walked over to the driver's side, leaned on the door, and stared at the horizon. The early light made her look softer, like the version of herself she'd been before. Life made her carry so much. Lucas stepped beside her, careful not to crowd. "The offer still stands. The garage, the investment, all of it, but only if you want it, and only on your terms." Maya glanced at him. "What if I say yes, but I'm still scared?" "Then we do it scared," he replied. Together, her eyes drifted down to her hand, the one that had worn the same silver ring for years. She hadn't taken it off, not yet. She had tried once, the day after their hilltop drive, but her fingers had shaken too much. It had felt like letting go of a ghost. But now, something felt different. She slid her thumb over the cool metal. "I kept this on because I was afraid of forgetting him, of forgetting who I used to be." Lucas listened without interrupting. "But lately," she continued, "I think I've been using it to keep people out, to convince myself I wasn't allowed to move on." She turned to face him. "I don't want to forget him, but I also don't want to miss what's in front of me." Then, slowly, deliberately, Maya pulled the ring from her finger. She didn't cry, she didn't stumble. She just held it in her palm for a moment, before slipping it into the glove box of her truck. Lucas watched silently, not needing to say anything. She wasn't letting go of her past, she was making space for her future. He smiled. "Now, that's the bravest thing I've seen in a long time." She chuckled. "I still expect you to help build the new shop. I wouldn't miss it for anything, just don't get in my way. No promises." They climbed into her truck together, the engine rumbling to life beneath them. As she pulled away from the curb, Lucas looked over at her hair in her face, grease on her sleeve, eyes steady on the road ahead. She wasn't fixed, she wasn't perfect, but she was moving forward. And this time, she wasn't alone. As they drove past the old garage suit, to be replaced by something new, Maya rolled the window down and let the wind rush in. Lucas reached for the radio, found an old soul song, and let it play. No grand declarations, no dramatic kisses. Just two people with history behind them and possibility ahead. And somewhere in the back of the truck, tools clinked softly together. A new garage was coming, and with it, a new chapter. Together,